Okay, let's call the meeting to order on Wednesday, May 6th at 4 p.m. We have a quorum. Would anyone like to propose we adopt the agenda? All in favor? Aye. Great. Do we have any visitor communication? Are you here to? Okay, great. Approval of the minutes. I move that we approve the minutes from last meeting. All in favor? Aye. All in favor? Aye. Great. Yeah, it is. It is. Um, this meeting's all about Jen. Yes. Take it away, Jen.
Well, thank you for giving me some time today to just update the Parks Advisory Board on giving a little bit more of a background of kind of how SPRD came to where they are today, and then what our challenges are in regards to having a community pool, because we know that is one of the conversations that constantly comes to our table. I actually had a patron today ask me why we didn't build a new pool in the community center when we remodeled. And so I was like, well, funnily enough. And then also a plan for what our plan is moving forward into fiscal year 27. So before we get started, I do just want to kind of set the scene and remind everybody that Sisters Park and Recreation District is a special purpose taxing district. And what that means is we are a different form of local government. There is a variety of special districts in the state of Oregon. There's actually over 30 different types of special districts. And we, along with the library and the fire district, are some of the special districts that are serving our community. And in case you didn't see, today is the inaugural National Special Districts Day, so very exciting, first one ever. Woo woo. No, I didn't. I just like happened to see it on Facebook, and I was like, oh, perfect timing. So what that means, and it's important that we recognize that, is because our funding is separate from the City of Sisters, it's separate from the school district, and obviously I'm preaching to the choir here. But one of the things that you'll constantly hear me say or hear me correct is that we are not a department. So people often call Sisters Park and Recreation department, and I always like to correct them and say district, because when you say department, it implies that we're under the city. And with that, we would love to be under the city, but there's a lot of benefits that don't come with being under the city. So, or if we were with the city, we would have a lot more benefits. And so it's important for people to realize that we are our own arm. We don't have all the funding structures that they have, and we have one specific charter, and that is to provide parks and recreation services. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and give you a little bit of history as to how we were formed and kind of why we're in the funding system that we are in. So back in 1995, there was a group of folks that came together and saw a need for an after-school program. I did not live here at the time. I actually lived in Washington at that time. And but what I do know some of the folks who established that, and there was apparently just a deficit for after-school programs here in Sisters. So they formed a nonprofit called SOAR, which is a name that still follows us at times, and created a after-school program. And after a few years, they kind of figured out that in order for this to be sustainable, that it needed a little bit more structure, a little bit more dedicated funding. So in 1998, they put on the ballot the formation of SOAR, Special District, they kept the name SOAR, to create a special district under the ORS 266, which allows the formation of a park and recreation special district. However, with the guise of only doing after-school programs. So our tax rate of 22 cents per thousand is reflective of only doing after-school programs. And so think about that. The after-school program that we're talking about is one program that we currently offer called Kids Club. That was what our tax rate was set for. And but there was always a greater vision and we always want to do more. It's what local government, special districts especially, they put things on the ballot, they want to get the yes, so they kind of undersell their value at times. They get the yes, and then they realize, we should have asked for a little bit more money. And so the folks who were involved with the district back then, Tom Cofield was the first executive director of the Park and Recreation District, and him, as well as the board of directors at that time, led the charge to raise over $1 million to build the Cofield Center. It was named after Tom Cofield, and I'm not quite sure if he was actually with the district when it was built at that time, but they named it in honor of him because of all the work that he had done. So I always laughed when I first started here, and people were like, we don't have a community center. I'm like, really? Because I work in one. I'm confused. But I see why people didn't really feel like the Cofield Center was a community center, because it was missing some of the elements that people tend to like to see in a community center, including a community gathering space and a gym and additional meeting space. So back in 2009, so 2009, is when we started, the board adopted a resolution to start formally calling themselves Sisters Park and Recreation District. We still have the SOAR Foundation. It's still an active group. They kind of go through ebb and flows as to how active and involved they are, because it is a volunteer nonprofit. But they exist to raise funds to help support SPRD, and also, for what it's worth, their charter says that they could support other community activities, but primarily they support Sisters Park and Recreation District. So if you hear the word SOAR, it's usually the foundation, and if you hear the word SPRD, not SPURD, we can go ahead and not call it SPURD anymore, that'd be great. Sorry, Gary. Then that's the district. Correct. I'm not sure who runs that foundation. I didn't realize it was actually still in existence till a meeting I had 2 days ago. So there you go. And so back in 2014, 15, they were starting to realize that, if we ever want to be more than what we are, and or if we just want to pay our bills, because they were having a really hard time paying the bills and honestly keeping the lights on, they needed additional funds. And so they did additional outreach. They worked with a company to host some group conversations and determined really what it was from the community, what they wanted from the district at that time. And as we know, there's a lot of support for local government inside the City of Sisters, but as you get to the outside of City of Sisters, there becomes less support for government and additional taxes and everything. So they were trying to figure out, what is it that people want from all areas of our district, because our district is greater than the City of Sisters. It's very similar to the school districts with this donut hole of Black Butte, and trying to figure out what the people who are outside of the Sisters city proper would support. And in that conversation, which I'm going to talk more about, was a conversation of a pool. And like I said, I'll talk more about that later. But what it was very clear was that people wanted to support programs, they wanted to support kids, but they also wanted to make sure that SPRD wasn't being wasteful with their money, and they wanted to see kind of the return on investment for that. And the pushing point at that point was that the community would support a 15-cent local option levy. So we went out for it in 2018 and it passed. And so now we're at 37 cents for assessed 37 cents for assessed 1,000. And I'll talk more about how that compares with some of our fellow entities in a minute. Local option levies are great. They're not necessarily meant to sit here and backfill your funding because it's 5 years. You have to go out for every 5 years. I think a lot of local governments, including us and the school district and other entities, kind of use them as, well, we need to have this to continue the services that we're doing. So they kind of become this rolling trend, just constantly do these local option levies. And for small districts and even bigger districts, it's a lift to do those every 5 years. And so it's not necessarily the end all be all that you want in regards to your funding. And so then, as you guys know, this last year, we moved into what I would consider a premier location from the Cofield Center to from the old elementary school into the new community recreation center. And now we're really at this pushing point where we are a lot more visible. We have a lot more people who know who we are. And with that comes more wants and asks and interests. And yet our tax rate is still what our tax rate is. And we increased our property, like the Cofield Center was 10,000 square feet. The elementary school is 43,000 square feet. Plus we have an 8-acre community park that we just built. And by the way, we went through a staff reorganization in fall and we eliminated a position. So we have, part of that was necessary. The position wasn't funding itself anymore. But we have this wonderful location. How are we going to maintain it? How are we going to keep it? How are we going to remain agile for the community to meet the growing and changing needs that we see here in Sisters? Thank you, Scott. So to put into perspective, you guys, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but we are one of the lowest funded park and recreation districts in the state of Oregon. And to be fair, a lot of special districts in Central Oregon are very low funded. Again, special districts are formed by very well-intended people who put things on a ballot and they want to really see it pass, and they tend to undersell their value, and then they pay the price in the long run. So Bend Parks and Recreation District has a permanent tax rate of $1.46 per assessed thousand. Redmond, which actually this was surprising to me, I thought theirs was higher, has a permanent tax rate of 37 cents per assessed thousand. And then our permanent tax rate is 22 cents. We know that Redmond's been trying to pass a local option levy for the past few years to fund the new recreation center and pool that they're building. I'm not quite sure what their plan is since they haven't passed that, but they did pass the bond to build the community center. And we also know that Bend has been very successful with passing bonds and other local option levies, as well as getting grants. And so it's not to, this is just kind of puts into perspective when people come to us and say, well, why don't you have this? And why do you have this? We don't want to be naysayers, but we also want people to understand that there are capacities with the tax rate that people are paying. They moved to a small town, they wanted to pay lower taxes, and with that comes a scaled back service delivery. That doesn't mean that there isn't hope for the future. There absolutely is, but it's kind of, it paints the picture as to why we don't have a pool. Part of the reason. So if you want to go ahead and move to the next one. So like you've already heard me say, we were formed originally to just have after-school programs. And along the way, prior to me, the people, the boards, the past executive directors saw a vision and they wanted more, and the community wanted more, and the staff were agile, and we've created a variety of options for our community. And a lot of this has to do with creative thinking. Some of this creative thinking isn't really possible anymore due just to some of the limitations that we have in place with liability and everything. One of the things that we started back in the day was committees. We used to have the lacrosse committee and the outlaw basketball committee, and all those things did wonderful work. But as laws evolve and things became a little bit more stringent, it became a little bit more difficult to have a semi-autonomous group under the direction of a governing body. And so we have separated ties from our committees, and absorbed some of those into our district. But it was through those committees that we were able to start things like the bike park and the skate park and the disc golf park. Those parks are still under us. We still work with those groups as volunteers. But some of our other committees have actually we were incubators for them to go start their own business, like outlaw basketball. So we have our three specialty parks and our one community park. We have this large community center that has a variety of programs and services, including rental opportunities and fitness offerings in the center. We have youth programs. We have a preschool program that was formed back I don't know, 15 years ago based on community need, with that after school program called Kids Club, youth athletics, specialty camps and day camps, and then a playground program that we actually partner with the city on. And then we also have adult programs. So we have adult softball league. We sometimes have a cornhole league, depending on if it's popular that year. And we also have been trying to add a variety of just adult recreation also. All that is scaled. You look at Bend and they have a guide that's like 100 plus pages because they literally have one staff member who works on youth soccer. That's amazing. I would love to be able to do that. But because they're able to do that, they're able to really focus and be specialists. We get to be jack of all trades. And sometimes there are some challenges that come with that. So you see that, and that's a lot. And I think we have a diverse offering for the amount of staff that we have. But we also need to realize that it's not like we don't have 50 adult programs in each recreation guide. We have like 3 or 4, and that's scalable based on how our staffing currently is. I'm going to go ahead and shift to the next one. So how are we able to do this? When I first started at SPRD, I don't know if Gary's heard me say this. I really didn't realize how much money Willamette Lane had until I left, and I was all like, wow, what decision did I just make? Sisters is pretty. But it's really wonderful to work in a community that cares so much and that people are willing to put their money where their mouth is at, and also their time. And so the reason we are able to be as diverse as we are and not just do Kids Club is because of the fact that we've been able to build strong partnerships with other local governments, including the City of Sisters, including the school district, and a lot of other nonprofits within the community. This takes time to do. It takes a commitment. I think we can lean more into this because I believe we do better when we work together. We are a small community, limited resources. We don't need to duplicate services. But that is a big reason as to why we've been able to do what we've been able to do. We also have multi-role staffing. So another way of saying we wear a lot of hats. For our fiscal year 27, we have budgeted 13.85 FTE, so full-time equivalent. Right now, we're currently running at about 11, and what that actually means is that's about 18 people. 2 are full-time exempt, so one's me, and then one's our deputy director. And then after that, we have 4 other full-time positions, and the rest are part-time. And so we're able to, part of the reason why they're part-time is because that's the need, right? We don't have a need for a full-time, we actually do have a need for a full-time facilities person at this point, but we didn't when we were the co-field center. And so part of it is the need, and then also what our current staff are able to work. And then last but not least, volunteers. We run a wonderful youth athletic program, and we wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for our volunteer coaches. We have a variety of special events, which I did not include in the slide before, and those are made possible due to working with Rotary and Kiwanis and other local groups that are able to help volunteer and for day of and support those events, because we don't have, even if we had every single staff working, sometimes that's just not enough for special events. And so we're lucky to be able to do that because of those 3 things. So for what it's worth, when you look at, couldn't even tell you what the city's budget is. Maybe you guys know off the top of your head. But our general fund budget for this coming year is $1.9 million. When I was at Willamette Lane, that was the size of the department I managed. So most special districts are, or not most special districts, park and recreation districts, the ones that we're kind of comparing ourselves to, have a way bigger budget than that, right? And so we're doing a lot with $1.9 million. And when I first started, it was like 1.4, so we've gotten a little bit better. I feel like we're at a better spot. So if you want to go ahead and shift to the next one. So one of the things that, before we get on this topic, I just want to talk about a little bit of history with our budget too. We have the history of the district. It really has been a little like, I have heard stories from previous director Liam when he started that they literally had shut the doors down. They couldn't pay their bills. And there was very similar, I'm assuming, based on what happened in La Pine not very long ago, where they just didn't have any money and they were going to just wait till those tax receipts came in and then start anew. And so when Liam started, the board was very focused on, are things making money? Everything had to make money, had to be self-sufficient, which is great in some respect, but also park and recreation districts are formed to help, it is to make things accessible. And so you kind of have this conflicting opinion where it's like, well, it needs to cover its cost, but we also need to keep it accessible. And so we've really worked hard to balance those two, because parks and recreation, back in the 80s and earlier, there really was this opinion that parks and recreation should be free for all. But as I was coming through college and entering into the field, and probably even before that, there was a little bit more like, okay, that's not really sustainable. We have to have a pay to play model. And so there are programs that we are pay to play, and there's are programs that are fully subsidized. And there's this balance between which programs are like that. And it's usually based off a greater community benefit versus an individual benefit. And I could talk to you for hours about cost recovery, but I won't bore you. And so when I first started, it's very typical for smaller districts to take out a line of credit for cash flow. So when you end the fiscal year in June 30th, you don't get your new tax receipts, your new tax dollars coming in. You get a bulk come in mid-November. And yes, you still have your registration fees coming in and everything, but it's not as much as you usually think it is. And so back in the day, the district was borrowing a line of credit up to $75,000 to get from July 1 to November 15th. And that's a very common practice. Well, that was interesting. And one of the things that I will say COVID actually really benefited our district, because we were able to kind of take a beat. We unfortunately did have to lay off almost all the staff, but they were actually making more money on unemployment than what we were paying them. So I think they were okay with it, and kind of build up a reserve and then build back strategically. So we built back based on our actual need. And it's one of those things where our staff know that we have to get to the point to where we see that something's sustainable before we add more staff to it. We can't just like, oh, we're going to add a staff to it and hope it's going to be successful. We don't have that luxury. We have to be wearing many hats until we're like, okay, we need to get somebody else in here, and we know this is successful to be sustainable, so that we can continue on and not blow our tax dollars, if you will, on overhead, because isn't a good setup for us. And so through COVID, and a lot of the grants we were able to apply for, we actually started a capital reserve fund, which we never had before. And so now we have money sitting aside that we're able to put a bond every year and put things like remodeling the community center or replacing the boiler when it goes out at the Cofield Center. And that was something that before we would have had to borrow money for. I'm not saying we have a ton of money in there. Like right now, as when we end this fiscal year, we're going to end it with $60,000. But that's better than what we had in the past. And we aren't using that line of credit. So we are in a way better financial position thanks to the leadership of the board, thanks to good, taking advantage of a really not great situation, if you will, and being very diligent with our funds and growing back in a smart way. So everybody's favorite question, why don't we have a pool? Or an ice rink, yeah. It's all the same reasons, right? So part of, you kind of heard the biggest reason why we don't have a pool. One of the things that I didn't mention is that all those lovely parks that we have, we don't own. We manage them. We paid for the improvements for them. We insure them, but it's all actually all school district property. So again, through partnerships, we've been able to make that work. But if we, or the city or the school district, if any local government was going to make a multi-million-dollar investment, it doesn't make sense to do that on land you don't own, that you don't control. So that's kind of one of the biggest hurdles. We don't own land. I don't know off the top of my head, short of tearing down some stuff, where there is enough land in at least the city of Sisters to actually build a pool that has a parking lot and to meet all the needs that our community would like to see it. Secondly, is the operating costs. People think, if they haven't been involved with pools very much, that, they break even. No, they don't. They always run into subsidy, and they're just incredibly expensive to operate. And so if we were to go into a venture where we're like, yeah, let's build a pool, well, we don't have additional tax dollars coming in to support that. We would have to give up probably all of our other programming, and it still wouldn't be enough to subsidize operating a pool. And some people say, well, what if it's just a seasonal pool? What if it's just and yeah, it would probably cost less, but the next slide's going to show you that it's still a pretty penny to build a seasonal pool. And you have less funding, less revenue generating opportunities with a seasonal pool as well. And then ultimately our tax base, which is, connected to that top one or that middle one, our current tax rate just is not sufficient enough to be able to build a pool. So I know I have a little bit of a reputation in this town of not liking pools, and that's not true. I think pools are wonderful. I would love to have one for our community. I am very cognizant of the fact that we are we are kind of at our capacity as it is, and it would not be I would not be a good leader if we supported going out for a pool that would basically bankrupt the district. And so I think that there is a way forward, but there's a few big things that have to happen before we do that. If you want to go to the next slide. So how much does it actually cost? And I will tell you, these are numbers from a few years ago. I bet it's more now, especially since concrete's like ridiculously expensive. So for an outdoor seasonal pool, and this is not including the cost of land, and this is not including the cost of operations, is $10 to $12 million. So it runs for 3 months out of the year. That's a lot of money to invest into something that runs for 3 months out of the year. I saw something in our old outreach. Somebody said, well, you could just turn it into an ice rink during the summer or during the winter. And I'm like, okay, that's true. Some stuff is possible, but there's a lot more. But I don't know how. Yeah, you probably have to really make sure that bowl is super can withstand freezing in that. And then an indoor year-round pool is $20 to $40+ million. And I say plus because honestly, pools are like buildings, are like anything. You can spend you can probably no less than 20 million, but you could spend $100 million on a pool if you wanted. Because half these things are then tied in with recreation centers also, because then they try to build in other revenue sources so that it can be somewhat sustainable. And so all those it just kind of gives you a better idea of what it would cost. So back in 2016, the district held this community, did some community outreach and had some really good conversations with stakeholders around a variety of different reasons, trying to figure out the messaging for the local option levy back in before they went out for it in 2018, to figure out what would be supported. And the conversation of a pool was brought up. And as you guys know, everybody wants a pool. They absolutely want a pool. They want to be able to go there to do therapeutic recreation. They want to have their kids do swim lessons. They see the value in it. But when we told them how much it would cost, the interest went way down. And that, by the way, was just operating costs. That wasn't even purchasing the land costs. And so I'm not naive to think that this is still the opinion, because this is 10 years ago. Our community has changed so much in 10 years. But I do think it is worth asking again and having a true understanding of what the community wants and what they're willing to pay for, because I think, as the city and the school district would agree, you know, we if we don't have the community support, we can't we can't move forward with some of these processes. It just doesn't make sense. It's not viable, and it wouldn't be a good use of tax dollars. So with that, if you want to move to the next one, the things that we would need to figure out before we would be able to build a pool is figure out our tax rate. Special districts, one of the things I didn't say is you can't just change your permanent tax rate. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to go do this. It'll be easy. You actually have to, there's a way to do it. You have to dissolve as a district and form a new district, which does not sound very easy to do. There is a pathway to do it. You can write it in the ballot to, if they don't, you can't just dissolve the district and not refund a new district. So, but we've seen Madras try to do this twice and fail. And granted, it's a different community, and they're trying to operate a pool. Different community, different, we know that, but I think the biggest concern, and the concern they had back in 2016, it's not that the people wouldn't support it, it's just confusing. It is confusing to the average voter. What do you mean dissolve and reform? And often, and I saw it in the Madras thing too, they actually had more people more people vote to dissolve the district than they did for any of it. And I think people just don't understand that there is a domino effect. Is there support for a bond measure? So not just increasing the operating levy, but is there support on top of that for, you know, an added tax rate that would cover the acquisition of land and the development of construction of a pool? Is there available land? I don't know. I haven't seen it, but maybe there's some land I'm not seeing out there. And one of the things that I always like to remind people is what is our town able to support in regards to the workforce? So high schoolers are typically the people who in the past work pools because they're lifeguards. We've seen that evolve over the years. I know when I was at Willamette Lane, we actually had a lot of folks come in, some retired folks actually coming back and working as lifeguards, and it was fabulous. But I'll tell you, during the summer, we have a hard time hiring day camp staff, let alone lifeguards. And lifeguards get paid minimum wage. It is a stressful job. It's life and death sometimes, and it's just not one of those things that seems to be as exciting as it used to be back in the day. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but that's one of the things that I always get a little bit worried about is, do we even have the folks who would be willing to work as a lifeguard? Because I'm picking on Madras, and it's just because they're experiencing so much right now. But their executive director sits on the stand, and at least once a week she is doing lifeguard shift. That is not good use of tax dollars, and that is not something that not why people go into becoming, you know, the leaders of. They want to lead. You can't lead if you're doing the lifeguarding work. Okay. Next, and I really just don't want to wear a swimming suit to work. No thanks. So kind of where we are right now, we have this lovely building, this lovely park, and everyone wants to know what's next. And so as we go into fiscal year 27, we're going to really focus on figuring out what is next. We want to make sure that we hear from our community. What do people want? You know, we did a lot of outreach when we built that park. And even when we did the community center remodel, But that was 3 years ago. People have moved into our community, people have left our community, and it's different when you see it, when you are in it, when you feel it. So we're going to be spending a lot of time engaging with the community, engaging with our stakeholders, seeing what people want, what people think we need, not only in regards to programs, but in regards to facilities and capital improvements. We're going to also identify what are those gaps? What does our community need? I know that I don't think that we need to be the answer to everybody in the town of in the city of Sisters. There are a lot of nonprofits. I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of nonprofits in this town, and they do some great work. And if that need is being met by a nonprofit, or that need is being met by the city or by the school district or whomever, we don't need to come in and swoop and do that. Like, I mean, there's a reason why we only do 4 events, because this town has a lot of events, and it doesn't necessarily need any more. But can we work together with them? Can we help complement those things? So there's other ways that we can still be connected to those things. But really, what are those gaps in our community? And then figuring out, based on those gaps and figuring out what people want, what is the cost? So people, let's just say we go through this process, and what people are asking for is they want a fully remodeled community recreation center. Let's just say it's going to cost $10 million, and they want all these new programs, which is going to require an additional coordinator and supervisor. So what we would do is we would figure out those costs and figure out what that means in regards to taxes. Or let's say they want us to buy the facility. Well, we got to figure out how much that would be in a bond, and figure out again what that would do to taxes. And then we are going to test it. So then we're going to go out and do some polling and figure out, okay, here are the options. Would you support this, which would get you X, Y, and Z? Would you support option B, which would get you the following? That's how you make informed decisions, so that we know what the community is actually willing to support. And it may be, we don't want to support any of that. We just want SPRD to remain the way they are. And that then we get to continue to then manage expectations with the resources that we have. But the outcomes of all that will be what is we hope to end fiscal year 27 with, so that we can start fiscal year 28 knowing what our next steps are. Because in May of 28, so fiscal year 28 starts in July of 27, but in May of 28 is when our local option levy is up for renewal. And so is it that we keep it the same? Is it that we try to raise it? Is it that we dissolve and reform and all those things? And so there is a lot that has to happen this next year. I'm very excited that we don't have very many capital projects on the list, because this is going to be a beast. We are going to hire out a consultant to do a majority of the work, but there's still going to be a lot of work on our staff for it. But this is really important, so that we continue to build and evolve as a district based on what our community is looking for and what our community will support. And by involving the community, then they will have more buy-in into the process. So that is my spiel. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. No, the school owns the land. I believe the Forest Service donated it to the school. Yeah. We own the building, but not the land. And so it's an interesting relationship. So, and it's worked out quite well. But I think it was one of those things that started off on a napkin that eventually got into a decent agreement. But yeah. And so it's kind of one of the things Kurt and I have always talked about, is if either of us were to leave, we need to make sure that our agreements are solid, and that the intent of these agreements that were put into place prior to us are able to be seen in a document, and not just, oh, well, that's what that was the intent, because we know what ends up happening with that stuff. So, yeah.
Just a quick comment. My nail in the coffin for the pool idea, unless we have something different going on. And I would love one too, don't get me wrong. Willamette, you heard her mention that Willamette, you didn't realize how much money Willamette had until you came here. We still were subsidizing pools to the amount of 50 to 60%. And that's with gate. We had very healthy gate receipts because we had a wave pool and that bought a lot of money in. And we had state tournaments. We got a lot of money for that, but we still were using about 40 to 50%, sometimes 6% tax dollars to keep it operational.
Just in comparison, do you know if Redmond has a levy?
No, they haven't passed a local option levy.
They're at 37 cents.
They're at 37 cents. And when I've talked to Katie, their executive director, she feels comfortable based on the reserves that they have to operate the facility for 2 years. But I don't know what their plan is after that. And they did have to cut down on the development of it through as prices have gone up and everything based on when it was originally planned. And I honestly don't know enough about their books to know. It's really hard to compare apples to apples with special districts. We're all just, even though we're all parks and recreation, we're all very different. But yeah, I'm hope that the community supports that because I think it's going to be difficult. They're going to probably have to have some limited hours otherwise, very limited hours.
So you mentioned some options when your levy is up in 28, either to renew it, dismantle, and start over. But then you said raise the rate.
Yeah, so we could increase. We could renew the local option levy at 15 cents, or the board could choose to try to renew the local option levy at a higher rate.
Okay, so the local option.
So still the
levy
local
can
option
be
levy, yeah.
raised without dissolving. That's just
Correct,
an
correct.
added tax, but has to be voted on. That's not a permanent tax.
Yeah, and the challenge is, and I think we all probably see it as voters and taxpayers, is it's really hard to go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we've already been doing all this stuff. But we still but we need more subsidy, but we're not going to give you anything more for that. And so part of it is that by dissolving and reforming, if we were to do that, what is the carrot? Is it purchasing that facility and remodeling it and doing it the way that people want to see it? Is it building a pool? Is it? And so I think that's kind of where some of these other districts get a little caught up in the minutia of it, if you will, because when you're not getting something new, but it feels like you're raising the taxes, sometimes that's a hard sell. So
I think the other thing too that impacts SPRD in particular is that the city owns the parks and we collect park SDCs. We've talked about that. Those are fees that people pay when they build new properties and stuff to help build new parks. And SPRD doesn't get SDCs. So when you see Bend and you see all those facilities in Bend, the big ice rink, the pools and everything else, but you look at their tax rate, well, that's not that much more. How are they doing it? They're collecting tons of SDC. Their SDC rate's very high and there's a lot of building going on.
So is that in their $1.49?
That's
separate.
No, that's
Even on top of that.
That's on top of that. And so those SDCs, they can use to build new facilities to support growth and those things. You can't use them for operational costs,
Right.
but they have a big enough tax rate to do that. So I think that's one of the hamstrings that SPRD has because of the unique relationship we have between the city and the park district. And that's why we need to work carefully, we, meaning this committee, to ensure that SPRD has what it needs because they don't have access to the revenue to build a facility using SDCs, which is the way a lot of those things are funded.
And I'll give a shout out to the city. They did contribute $150,000 of SDC dollars to this community park. And so they didn't have to do that. And that was a wonderful collaboration and support that they did to help fund that park. And honestly, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have been able to meet our matching requirements for that grant. So.
mean, I've been blown away by, I remember a few years ago, we had a meeting about soccer, and you told me how you were funded for an after-school program and only an after-school program. And that, to me, was the end of the conversation of why are we doing all these other things and expecting them to be done well with no money. So I don't know. I mean, you're just giving us information. I think you're doing the right thing by finding out what the community thinks SPRD should be. That information, that one piece that we are funded just for an after-school program, I think is a huge piece of information for the public to understand where you are.
Absolutely.
And one of the reasons I asked Jennifer if she was willing to do this and made sure that it was okay with Scott is that when and if these options are coming out and they're talking to the community, the people in this room that sit on this board are advocates for them. You can be advocates for them if you choose. And now you have an understanding of why that advocacy has a need and a reason. And sort of a unique relationship, because I've not seen a relationship like this elsewhere in the state that I'm aware of, where it's we own the land, we own the parks, they do the programming, and we keep the dollars. I'm not good.
Anyone else have questions?
So if you were to go to propose dissolving it and then reforming it, if it sounds really risky. It's not like if it doesn't get reformed approval, you still get to go back to what you had, or?
You can write it in a way that if it's not voted to be reformed, then so it's dissolve the district and then reform a new district at a higher tax rate. But if both don't pass, neither pass. And so you can't, because that's what Madras was experiencing. They had the dissolve the redistrict pass, but not the funding. And so you can write it in a way to where it's a yes, or no. But no, when I first heard about it, I was like, you want to do what now? Maybe I need to update my contract. So, well, if you guys ever have any more questions, you guys know where to find me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share more about all that stuff. So thanks for letting me.
Yeah, no, thank you for all the information. That was very informative.
You're very
With
welcome.
that PowerPoint, maybe we could share it with a couple of folks who aren't
Yeah.
here.
I'll email it to you.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course, of course.
Would you like to?
Next,
Thank you.
I think, we're staff updates, and I'm going to invite Jackson Dumanch, our Operations Public Works Manager, up here to give you an update.
Good afternoon. So as Scott said, Jackson Dumanch, Public Works Operations Manager, here to just share some updates on projects that we've completed in the works and some things coming soon. Biggest one, I think the one most people are looking forward to, is the dog park at Gateway Park and Mobility Hub, formerly known as East Portal. The fencing has been installed. We're working on, yes, clapping. We are working on kind of filling in some gaps underneath the fence. It was a natural area, so a straight line fence doesn't work great in a natural space. So we're kind of filling in some of those gaps so that dogs can't escape. So that should be done by the end of the week. We do have some amenities that are incoming, drinking fountain with a dog bowl at the bottom, a sign with park rules, basic do's and do nots, waste bag dispenser, all the things that make a dog park are incoming. Certainly by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, that fountain is just, it's on order. It's getting here. Adjacent to that, the Sisters Community Labyrinth, we are, again, material is on order, but getting a split rail fence installed around the perimeter of that, just to discourage folks from walking straight through it. They do a lot of work keeping the rocks in place and keeping weeds at bay. So just something to kind of help define that space. They requested that. We worked it into the budget. We got a good quote on it, so we're moving forward on that one. Again, that will be done by the end of this fiscal year. A couple smaller things, but still great to hear. Buck Run Park, that's our little pocket park on the creek across from the campground. The bench that overlooked the creek rotted out. It was just wood right into the soil. We replaced that with a metal post bench, so it's concreted in. The top is still a nicely stained piece of wood, so get some longevity out of that, and also safety. Don't want anybody sitting down on a bench that could topple over.
It gets used.
It does. It's a great spot. Village Green, the picnic shelter, we replaced the old cedar shake shingle roof with a metal roof. So that is done. We got snow guards on the side adjacent to pedestrian traffic just to stop any, if we do ever get snow again, from falling off of the roof onto folks, just in case. Also at Village Green Park, we're working on a ADA path leading from the southern entrance in the fence where there is ADA parking to the Veterans Memorial. As of right now, it doesn't have ADA access to the gazebo itself, but it does go to all of their memorial stones where they have the names of all those who have served. I'm sorry? Concrete. Half of it is already in. They started at the gazebo side and they're working their way towards the sidewalk. First pour was today, second pour going in tomorrow. By next week, it'll be open to pedestrian traffic. And so we're hoping to have all that done by Memorial Day for the veterans. Another project we've been working on, Creekside Campground. Our city arborist put together a tree assessment report for that campground. It's got probably the oldest and the largest trees in the city, just in the Creekside Park in general, which the campground is a part of. So that report identifies high hazard trees, trees in need of monitoring, just greater detail for that stand of trees so that we can better maintain that. It gets a lot of use, so it's a lot of potential targets for falling limbs. So just making sure that the trees there are safe and healthy. We're very excited about that one. That will be going to the Urban Forestry Board next week, Monday, for review. And once we have their recommendations and comments, we'll move forward on treatment. Few coming soons. Not as excited as anything as I said, but the Village Green showers and restrooms, those floors is it's a urethane style coating. It's waterproof, but it's very hard to remove. So it takes diamond grinding to get it off, and it's in great need of repair. So we're going to be looking at that in fall, pretty much after Folk Festival, and a lot of that use drops off, getting in there, shutting down half the facility, resurfacing the floors. First Street Park, if you've noticed, there are some really nice decorative tiles on the benches and around the stage. Skateboards and time have a way of knocking those tiles off, so we are working with the original artist on getting some more of those made. So we'll go in again after the high use period, get a professional in there and replace those tiles that need replacing. And then finally, Gateway Park and Mobility Hub will be the next site for our security cameras. We already installed them here at City Hall and at our Public Works facility, or Public Works headquarters facility. And that will be the next location. Just considering dog park, transit hub, just makes sense. That is what I have. Do you folks have any questions? Thank you.
It was embarrassing to be talking about dispensable space and making sure everybody had Class A roofs when our entry shelter had a cedar shake roof.
It was time. The wind was taking the shingles.
Just in the interest of time, I'll move quick, but I just wanted to kind of just put a bow on the Northwest Park project. The idea was not to kind of engage in too much further discussion, other than just to kind of let you know that the council did adopt the master plan on April 8th. And the plans I've sent around here include the preferred concept, which has got a couple variations. Basically, parking lot, the Three Sisters bouldering element, the playscape elements, which are D and E on the plan. The first page shows also a bathroom facility in Keynote C, and then an optional basketball court facility that could be added back in at a later time. There's two variations, one with and one without. It also includes walking paths around the perimeter of the project, as well as kind of a seating area, green space. There's just two different options there. One is a reduced parking lot possibility. Again, this was just a master plan. These were just kind of, they're more refined than a typical master plan, and they're fairly well refined, but they're not like, they're not construction, they're not to the point of where you could go off and just do construction off of them yet. And council, part of their goals, council goals, has added a provision to come up with a funding plan and do some further design work on this for the next fiscal year. Not likely to be built in the next fiscal year. We will be going out to see if there's any funding or grant funding opportunities for this, for the park. So the earliest a park would be constructed, I think, would be in the, not this upcoming fiscal year, but the next one. And so we'd also have to go through a land use process, just like you did, and opportunities for the neighbors to have comment and get it fully approved, and then go, if it, then go into the design phase. So that is basically a summary of that, Councilor Ross.
Yep, I think that's pretty accurate. The only thing that if you look at the second page, you see a smaller restroom, and I think the council is pretty firm on the fact that if we build a restroom facility there, which we will, that we'd want to see a picnic shelter, kind of what SPRD did right over here in the other. It makes sense to extend that roof line out and make it a place where people can sit. I'm not sure why it didn't show up on the second set of plans. And the berm, were you involved? Have we discussed the berm? The sledding berm. Yeah. That's the idea anyway. That came from Mayor Letts, who said, we see people all the time, and Nancy does, on the little itty bitty berm at the campground, sliding down that hill anytime there's anything white on it, sometimes even when there isn't. And so, well, the pine, I had pine pollen on my car when I came tonight, so there might be yellow snow.
And then just finally on the UGB amendment, just wanted to keep you guys in the loop of how that project is progressing. It is under review by the city and the county right now for formal adoption. The preferred boundary is still the area out here to the east and to the southeast, 318 acres, going all the way up to the airport and then connecting all the way down. There's 4 parcels along Highway 126 that are included as part of that. Scheduled to go to the City Planning Commission on the 21st of May. Also has to go through the County Planning Commission and their process simultaneously. Hoping sometime this summer that we can get a formal adoption of that, and then we go to the state for their acknowledgement and approval, hopefully. We're also simultaneously looking at our annexation requirements. Those are kind of the, I don't call it a wish list, but the requirements for annexation, such as affordable housing, such as parks, park requirements, and a whole host of other things that the city would be looking for as part of an annexation. Right now, our current annexation standards are pretty spare, pretty sparse, so we're beefing those up. Yeah, which means that they're hardly even there at all. But yeah. So, and then the third component to this process is the area planning process, which right now the UGB is just a boundary. It's all one color. It doesn't designate where things are going to go specifically. Applying the area plan process will actually apply land use designations to those parcels. So they'll start to kind of give some more framework to how it will develop out there. And that will be a community process, public process with opportunities for input. And so that'll start probably gearing up in August, September through the rest of the year timeframe. That just quick final statements here. Next meeting would be July 8th, or July 1st rather. So we'll have to kind of decide if that's too close to July 4th and we want to postpone that to maybe the following week or something like that. But that's the target range for the next meeting. And then, as you know, Doug Beal had to step down because he was moving out of town. So we have a vacancy with the board. So we have reached out to somebody who interviewed last time to see if they were interested, and it looks as though that might be a go, but we won't know until formal adoption by the mayor at the May 13th council meeting.
The updates or questions? No? Okay. Do you have any more updates for us? I'll get right on that. Excellent. Gary, do you have some updates? Fair enough. Other business, open discussion. Does anyone have anything they would like to address other than what we've discussed? No, pretty clean cut meeting. All right, well, I guess we're adjourned at 5:03. Thank you.